I'm going to start jumping online every now and then just to give quick updates on things that I think are pretty important for Claremont County and beyond when it relates to the political spectrum. I want to give a quick update today on what I call the Allen Freeman Rule, which is something that was just adopted by the Ohio Election Commission on August 29th. So, the Allen Freeman Rule, as shocking as this might seem, says that if you're a politician and you know of money that was spent on your campaign and you maybe even participated in that money and that spending, you can't claim that I don't have to report anything because I never got a bill. That was the Alan Freeman defense that resulted in him getting a $50,000 fine, a man who is a complete disgrace to integrity and is going to be our next common pleas clerk of courts in Claremont County. So the original Alan Freeman case, the affidavit was filed on August 11th. The rule was adopted on August 29th, which is 4 years, over 4 years from the original affidavit for something that is obvious and that anybody with half a brain or an IQ greater than 20 would think is needs to happen. That if you're a candidate, you can't say, "Well, I never got a bill on something I participated in, so I don't have to report anything." Famously, Alan Freeman had over $280,000 spent on his campaign running for state rep, a failed campaign for state rep in 2020. He only reported that $15,000 was spent on his campaign. So the $280,000 that was spent, all labeled as paid for by committee to elect Alan Freeman, was never reported. That's it. Separately, by the way, as a householder candidate, about between him and Gene Schmidt, $500,000 spent on dark money advertising. It's totally dirty. It's totally corrupt, and these people are the scum of the earth. But I want to show you what happened with the Ohio Election Commission, which is scum of the earth also. These people are not there to protect the interest of Ohioans or to make campaign finance have any level of integrity. They're there to protect insiders and to go after outsiders like Joe Blysten and others that, albeit they may screw up their campaign finance reporting, don't deserve to get singled out when other people like Freeman and householder candidates run scot free. So I'm going to play some video of first an Alan Freeman ad and then just a few minutes of the Ohio Election Commission across two meetings, August 15th and August 29th. But let's start with the Alan Freeman ad, just so you can get one of them. There were several of them. He didn't know anything about this. He didn't know there was any money spent on it. But let's watch and see who's actually in the ad that Alan Freeman was ignorant of.
A small business owner, a strong conservative, a family man. Alan Freeman will bring these same conservative values to the Ohio House, building business and a better Ohio for all our families. Alan Freeman for State Representative.
Okay, so that was Alan Freeman's ad. Okay, so one of them. So remember, the question was, okay, Alan, this and a whole bunch of mailers that he approved. How come none of this was ever on any campaign finance report? Well, I don't have to report anything. I never got a bill for it. It is so corrupt. It is so stunning to the sensibilities of any person. But that's the way Alan Freeman's mind works. So what I'm going to show now is what happened at the Ohio Election Commission. So on August 15th, when I was there on other matters, they were going to consider the Alan Freeman Rule. By the way, here's the Alan Freeman Rule. And the Secretary of State asked for it to be delayed in consideration. And so it didn't really get approved until August 29th. So the Alan Freeman Rule never got adopted until August 29th. But I'm going to play a couple of clips. They're labeled August 15th to August 29th across those two meetings. The first person you're going to see is Brian Katz. Brian Katz works for Secretary of State LaRose. Brian Katz is absolute vermin, okay? His title is, I think, Director of Election Integrity or something. And if integrity to you means that he has special sidebar conversations with insider candidates to help protect them from any problems, while at the same time telling anybody who's not on the favored list, I can't give you any legal advice, then Brian Katz is your man. This guy's ethics is through the floor. So he personally gave advice to Alan Freeman's lawyer, Don Bray, not to report things that should have been reported. He personally gave advice to Gene Schmidt's campaign not to report things that should be reported. Both of the things that he told him not to report would now be subject to this Alan Freeman rule that has now been adopted. Okay, so it was Brian Katz telling them, well, if you don't get an invoice, you never have to report anything. It's totally asinine. But what also is asinine is with, for example, Gene Schmidt. He had a conversation with her on the weekend, with her husband on the weekend about their campaign. Apparently, it's special treatment for certain people. And with Alan Freeman, he had special dealings with Don Bray, Freeman's attorney, to do a fake filing to make it appear that Freeman was doing something about his campaign finance when he was not. But let's watch Brian Katz.
A small business owner, a strong conservative.
Very much. Good morning, Commissioners. Brian Katz from the Ohio Secretary of State's office. Our office appreciates the Executive Director sent us a copy of the draft advisory opinion planned for today. However, the Secretary is still out on military duty right now, and we were not able to to seek his input on our proposed feedback. And so in light of the potential impacts to candidate reporting requirements and our office's need to issue guidance.
So remember, he said there's potential impact. We need to issue guidance. LaRose is on military duty. All these reasons. We can't have you take action today. We don't want you to take any action today because we got to do all this guidance and stuff.
And continue to give guidance on this matter. We request respectfully that you table the vote on this until your next meeting so that we have time to adequately prepare and discuss internally for its implementation.
So they're going to need to prepare and discuss internally its implementation because, this is a far-reaching rule that you have to report shit you knew about. Okay, but let's keep going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Katz. Anybody have any questions?
So there's going to be some conversation here, and I was in the audience. So at some point, I raised my hand. You can't hear me, and I'm like, "Can I talk? Can somebody other than the insiders talk at this kind of thing, like in the manner of public participation at a normal government meeting?" But let's kind of watch the questions here a little bit of what gets asked.
I have no issue. Just FYI, waiting for feedback from the Secretary's office.
That's Stephen Caraway talking.
Anyone else?
I agree. I'd like a little time to review it in more detail myself. I'd move that we table the matter for consideration until our next meeting.
So, by the way, Stephen Caraway was a householder lieutenant, and as a reward for his great work on the householder crooked team, he got promoted to be on the Ohio Elections Commission by Governor DeWine. The guy that just talked, Carl Kirshner, this guy's a special case. He's new, and he's not a friend of the people. I'll tell you that. He's there to basically strong arm protecting insiders. And so he just said to table. There was he made a motion to table this because of the request. I'm in the audience. It's about now. I'm saying, hey, can I make any comments on this?
Been moved. Is there a second?
You want to hear from Mr. Hicks? I mean,
It's totally up to you.
it's up to
Commissioners.
else on.
Want to hear from?
My thought is that we've already moved and we can revisit the issue at the next meeting if anybody would like to address.
So this Kirshner guy is a complete D-bag, okay? Because these meetings are in Columbus, they make it as hard as possible for people to participate in the meetings. So he knows it's August 15th. When he says, well, at the next meeting, well, that would mean, for example, me, lowly scumbag citizen that doesn't hang out with the bigs in Columbus, that I would have to drive back to Columbus, spending 2 hours each way to be able to comment on this. They could take my comment right here. But they don't want comment from people like us. And you're going to hear that here with this interspersed of some of the discussion they had across the 15th and the 29th.
They believe that this opinion was, I guess I would say, in concert with the advice that they provide to people when they are faced with questions under similar circumstances. And so that's why they didn't necessarily have any updates.
When you spoke to the Secretary of State's office, did they indicate that the advice that they provide is consistent with the advisory opinion?
That is the impression that I took from what was said to me. Yes.
So now they've just said that the advice that the Secretary of State's office is giving is supposedly consistent with what's in this new thing, which is complete bullshit. It is complete bullshit. It's completely contrary to the advice that was given in the Alan Freeman case and in the Alan Schmidt case by Katz himself. And remember, on the 15th, that clip you just saw was on the 29th, Katz says, we need to prepare all kind of guidance and everything. Well, I guess all that's out the window. We didn't need to do any of that. So the notion that now they act like, oh, well, this is consistent with the guidance. Well, I don't know if you guys have some sort of IQ issue or you got some call from the governor about covering shit up, but how is it consistent with the guidance when you guys have been involved in multiple cases before the Ohio Election Commission, when the Secretary of State's office itself gave contrary guidance? One thing that's interesting too is you notice on the 29th, Katz is not there. Katz is not there. I'm not there either. Okay. My bet is Katz didn't show up because he's afraid I might be there and I might comment, because this guy runs like a sissy out of the room if anybody would dare comment to challenge something he says. On the Gene Schmidt matter, even though there were emails that Katz had personally given instruction, they fought and the election commission allowed that Katz didn't have to testify as to his personal interaction with Gene Schmidt's campaign. That makes absolutely no sense. The guy was material to the case. He admitted that he had had conversations with him, and it was in emails that it was discussed. But they're like, oh no, we don't need to hear anything that he says. He's in some protected class. These people are like, I don't know how to describe. They're like cockroaches. As soon as the sunlight comes out on any of them, they go running. So nice suit aside, Mr. Katz, and bullshit aside, why don't you? I'd be glad to debate you any day on election integrity, because it seems to me like you try to avoid any discussions that would involve you actually having to take a public question about election integrity or to be questioned or challenged in any way. But let's keep going here.
And historically, we have very rarely, to be honest with you, but we have in the past, had comments, conversation with interested parties.
So Richter's talking about having conversations from interested parties. Okay. Hey, I might be an interested party. The whole rule is the result of a case I brought. By the way, the case I brought, like in all of the cases that I have brought that involved household or crooked finance, Phil Richter, the director, wanted the cases to be either dismissed or finding of no violation. Only because of me pushing, did I get it to the point that these cases would even be considered. The Freeman case took over a year of testimony, and ended with one of the commissioners saying this was a violation in plain sight. If it was a violation in plain sight, how dysfunctional is the Ohio Election Commission that it took over a year for Alan Freeman? It took 4 years from the originally filing an affidavit to an opinion that says, if you're aware of money that was spent on your campaign, you can't hide reporting it by claiming you never got an invoice. So Richter's talking here about getting input from other people, from interested parties, as he calls. Let's hear who's the interested parties.
I would probably point out Mr. McTighe and Mr. Bry, probably more than anybody else, because they have historically been more involved with commission operations than anybody else.
So Don McTighe and Don Bry, they are more involved with commission operations than anybody else. What are they? These are the preeminent Republican and Democrat lawyers that protect the insiders before the Ohio Election Commission. The entire thing is a rigged dog and pony show where you have these insider attorneys that have a special relationship with Phil Richter, who makes a recommendation to the commissioners as how they're supposed to vote on things. And those are the interested parties that get to have special input. Lowly person like me, who dared to bring cases on people who are crooked householder candidates like Alan Freeman, Gene Schmidt, and Brian Stewart. God forbid that you would get any input from somebody like that. But these other people, Don Bray, Don McTighe, and I would throw in there Ron O'Brien as well. This is the, Larry, these are the three stooges of the insider control of the Ohio Election Commission. That it's all kind of a rigged dog and pony show. What's so funny is that if you were like a school board candidate and you broke some rule and you get a thing from the Board of Elections, you're all nervous. I see this. People come there all nervous, getting a $50 fine, all that kind of stuff. On the other hand, people like Alan Freeman, Gene Schmidt, and Brian Stewart make up these audacious, crazy lies, and they just ignore all the rules. They're the Larry Householder mentality, and they don't worry about anything because they know that by and large, they're going to be protected, that these people that are appointed by the governor on the Ohio Election Commission are not there to police campaign finance integrity. They're there to create a smokescreen that this matters. I mean, case in point, how on earth does Steve Caraway, a lieutenant in the householder operation, get put as a commissioner on the Ohio Election Commission? That just says we don't care the optics. We just want to have crooks on the Ohio Election Commission. Hey, because they're pretty good at covering shit up. Okay, so let's finish this out and keep watching.
Mr. Richter, I do applaud you for, I think it was the right thing to do to reach out to a couple of attorneys that have a lot of experience before this commission, and particularly this issue, and also Secretary of State. So
That was, by the way, I just said it, but that was Steve Caraway telling the commissioners, "Oh, Phil Richter, what a great job you did by reaching out to insider attorneys that have a vested interest in us covering for politicians. Great job. I'll tell all my householder people I work with to go hire Don Bray so he can help them with this, so they can cover up their campaign finances." Thank you, Steve Caraway. You're a true inspiration. Hey, Caraway, did you ever think that you might say, "Hey, wasn't this a case brought by Chris Hicks that resulted in this? Didn't Chris Hicks want to speak at the last meeting? Wouldn't it have been good to get Chris Hicks's input? Since the case I brought that Richter wanted dismissed, and the commissioners did everything in their power to let it get, basically to wear me down so that it would just go away. That case is the reason this exists. But thank you, Steve Caraway, for your magnanimous support of Phil Richter's engagement of insider crook attorneys.
Is there a second?
So this is a replay of me
It's
trying to talk.
Totally up to you.
Back on August
Commissioner.
15th.
Else on.
Want to hear from,
Look at him sitting there.
I thought.
They don't want to hear from Chris Hicks.
And we can revisit the issue at the next meeting if anybody would like to address it.
Mr. Kirchner, of course, will be some reason why, we'll revisit. Chris can drive here again on the 29th because we don't care. We don't care about this. This is all a smokescreen. I tell you what, this is an area that the crooked insider class. So when it comes to me bringing cases, I'm 7-0 right now. And that's not because these people want me to be successful. It's because you have to basically back it into a corner so hard. I'm going to have another video. They're trying to change their rules to basically make it harder to get anybody convicted on serious things at the Ohio Election Commission, because I guess they're a little worried. I got 3 people, two, we'll see what happened with Stewart, but 2 people and 1 in process that are related to crooked householder financing. They haven't done shit. Okay. They don't do shit on any of this stuff. And now their biggest concern isn't that we had a $61 million bribe scheme. Their biggest concern is, how do we make new rules that'll make it harder for people like Chris Hicks to come in here and be able to get one of these crooked politicians to be held accountable? These people are disgusting. I don't know that the governor's office has any shame in any of this stuff. Okay. But they should. Why are these commissions made up of people that are basically bagmen for protecting the insiders? Do we love? I tell people, and I'm going to close here in a second, but I tell people that the issue with Larry Householder wasn't what he did. What he did happens all the time in Ohio politics. If you are an insider, you get all kind of money spent on you and special things happening for you that you don't get reported anywhere. This was one of the testimony of Brian Stewart's attorney. Treasurer, is it's normal that, an insider candidate has people do stuff on them that never gets used, never gets reported, never gets paid for. That's normal. What Larry Householder did was he did it at a scale that caught the attention of the feds. And God forbid it would ever catch the attention of anybody like Dave Yost or the Franklin County prosecutor, because a lot of this stuff would be Franklin County because of the way the election commission, that they'd actually do anything about this. I'll tell you, when you have a situation where Larry Householder goes down, but nobody's held accountable that is a lieutenant in the operation. Nobody's held accountable. Zero, nobody, nada, none. No politician that was part of the bribe scheme is held accountable, except by me, me. And then all I can do is Ohio Election Commission brings a fine. Then nobody cares. Nobody cares. But on the other hand, somebody like Joe Blystone, they go after him relentlessly because we can't have any grassroots outsiders. I'm not necessarily a fan at all of Joe Blystone. And what he did in his campaign finance was not correct. But there's a big difference between the systematic institutional corruption of Ohio politics that I'm aware of mostly on the Republican side, but it probably exists on the Democrat side also. and a grassroots candidate like Joe Blysten that screws up their campaign finances. It is so repulsive. And until we choke out the oxygen of crooked campaign finance in Ohio, doing everything we can possibly do in the face of people like these shills on the Ohio Election Commission, nothing's going to change. No grassroots candidate's going to be able to persevere against this corrupt system. And I see Joe Blysten making a lot of comments now about, grassroots candidate. Joe, I'll give you a hint. Ain't gonna effing work. Grassroots candidates cannot succeed in Ohio because the system is rigged from the inside. And until we focus on busting that corrupt system of campaign finance, I mean, what more evidence do we need to have? Householder did it, so big that it's obvious. I just had the treasurer for Brian Stewart admit this happens all the time, that people do work for candidates behind the scenes, may or may not get show on any report. I didn't know they had to show on a report. If I have people do a bunch of stuff, but I don't use it, can't I not report anything? The stuff like this, the absurdity. But just to close, there's now a rule after 4 years that basically says if you're a candidate like Alan Freeman and you know about money that was spent, and you can't then claim, well, I never got an invoice, and therefore I never have to report anything on my campaign finance report. You would think this would be obvious. I'm a Republican. You would think Republicans would think this is super 100% obvious, but these people are not Republicans. They're swamp creatures. Alan Freeman is a swamp creature. Gene Schmidt is a swamp creature. They're only Republican to the extent it helps get them elected to some office where they can juice their need for power. But this rule is now in effect. Whoopsie-doo. And I'll close with this, because for all I've said, you can't claim you didn't get an invoice. The funny part about it is these people all got invoices. They all got invoices. Either they got invoices directly from the vendors, the contractor that did it, which I think all three of them did. Two of them I can prove they did. Okay. But they ignored them or said, we were told not to pay the invoice or not to do anything with the invoice. Or they got collection letters later because they had not paid these invoices. That's a Brian Stewart case. It's like, okay, did it give you a hint that maybe there was something unpaid out there when you got collection letters for it? So any event, that's the rundown. I am glad that this rule's in effect. It shouldn't have taken 4 years to do it. Brian Stewart, Alan Freeman, and Gene Schmidt are all team householder candidates that violated what is now this rule. They didn't even need this rule. It was obvious what they were doing was in violation of the law. The rule just helps to clarify that you can't have this bullshit excuse in there. And Brian Katz, I mean, what a shill. What a shill. Where's all this guidance, Brian? And for them to sit up there and for Richter to sit up there and claim, oh, no, they didn't have to do anything because it's already, this new rule is consistent with the guidance that they gave. When Phil Richter and these other people know that Brian Katz personally gave Gene Schmidt and Alan Freeman advice completely contrary to the rule and told them they didn't have to report things. So that's an update on the OEC. I'll have another update on the OEC at some point. That's going to be a rundown of their new attempt to have rules to try to make it harder for anybody to be held accountable.